The movie starts with a state-of-the-art penitentiary experimenting with the effects of research chemicals. The test subjects, technically prisoners of the state, are volunteers for the project, aiming to reduce their sentence time. The program is overseen by the sympathetic and hospitable Steve Abnesti, along with his assistant Mark. The inmates have their own quarters, conduct duties, and are free to move without being watched by a guard. The subjects are subjected to daily drug tests, all of which affect their emotions and perceptions of their environment. Then we see Ray, a man who has volunteered to be a subject for a specific study. The man cannot stop laughing. A joke is given to him to make him laugh. They even try to inform him about one of the world's biggest tragedies, but he cannot stop giggling. Steve sees him giggle and smiles since their experiment was successful. The next day, Steve goes to the Spiderhead research facility. They are aboard a boat in the next scene, and a man wearing a blindfold sits between the two scientists. This prisoner's name is Jeff. Following that, we show Jeff walking into a kitchen, where there is also a woman with whom Jeff appears to be acquainted. They are both crooks who have committed distinct crimes. Jeff acts strangely, talking and looking at things in unusual ways as if he has been influenced by someone. Steve remains close to him, watching his motions and words. He looks at a factory and says he enjoys viewing it. When Jeff is in his room, he reminisces about the good times when he was free. He used to go to parties with his girlfriend, and life used to be good. We then see that one night he was overspeeding and got into an accident. We are then back in the lab. Jeff is ready to be interviewed, and a woman walks in and sits right in front of him. She has an appealing appearance, and Jeff is unable to take his eyes off of her. When Jeff is asked questions, he rates the woman 8 out of 10 for her attractiveness, and when it is the woman's turn, she does not even give him a 5. They were administered a love medication, it turns out. They begin to feel something, and their body language changes. They become uncomfortable or overly comfortable. As Steve observes sitting near to the two individuals, the two begin to feel things for each other, indicating that the medicine is working properly. They even get intimate because the two can't stop themselves. However, the effects of the medications administered to them wear off after a period, and this is where the scientist gets to play. He wants to see if they still act like a couple once the affect wears off. They behave similarly for the next 3 days, as Steve notices. After a while, however, the two do not really seem infatuated towards one another. Now, it is time to conduct another experiment. Steve puts something in Jeff's Moby Pack and tells him not to let anyone touch it. Otherwise, they could get in trouble. In this experiment, they have brought in a different woman. She is older, and her name is Sarah. They have been injected with the same dose as Jeff and the previous woman, Heather. After the talk with Sarah, Jeff ends up sleeping with her as well. Now, he has slept with 2 different women while being influenced by the love drug. It is time for Steve to sit next to him and make some observations. He asks him if he should give Darkenflox to one of the women Jeff slept with. It will be revealed later on what Darkenflox is. Jeff, however, does not choose any woman. We then learn that the substance that was given to the subjects is known as N40, which could very much change the world. They plan on using it to make people love each other. When Jeff is about to go away after the conversation, Steve asks him what he really wants, and before Jeff gives him an answer, the scene changes. We talked about him being drunk and overspeeding the car earlier. We now learn that one of his friends died in that accident, and upon being asked what he really wants, Jeff tells Steve that he wants to go back in time and fix what happened that night. We then show him relaxing at the facility before a guard approaches to summon him. He is given a phone and listens to a voicemail from his parents. His father informs him that this will be his final voicemail. Later, Christmas approaches, and Jeff celebrates it with Lizzie a little early. The scene then shifts, and Jeff is back at work, seated in the same chair, but this time with a large man in front of him. Jeff feels irritated and refuses to associate with that man. He walks out, and there, he learns that Sarah is being asked the same questions as him. He gets angry and starts yelling, but Steve tells him to shut it down, as he explains that their lives in this place are much easier than the ones in the actual prisons. Jeff sees Steve's point of view and apologizes to him before agreeing with the doctor. That night, we notice Steve acting strangely. He is dancing around in the middle of the night, and it is clear from his actions that he has taken the same drug, N40. The following day, Jeff sits with Lizzie and tells her about the Darkenflox. He informs her that if it is given to someone, they will feel as if they are on fire, if not worse. From the way he acts around Lizzie and how he talks to her, it seems like he is attracted to the woman. We then see Steve asking his assistant to inject him with a double dose of one of the drugs. The man tells him to be careful, but Steve orders him to go on. Meanwhile, Jeff comes. Steve confronts him about the women again, wondering whether he should give them Darkenflox, and Jeff reiterates that he has no feelings for them. They give Heather some Darkenflox, and as Steve examines her, we witness her acting as if she is on fire. She can't sit still, and her head is in emotional torment. Objects start to get dangerous for the woman as she worsens, and we witness her slamming her head on the wall and tossing objects around. When she hits her head on the wall, it gets worse, as the Darkenflox is overflooded in her system. Heather commits suicide while on the Darkenflox after she damages her MobiPack, the device that administers the drugs. This causes Mark to doubt their work in the facility. Steve is shocked at this. As Steve rushes out of the projection room, he drops his keys. Jeff unlocks Steve's desk compartment, discovering that there are no higher-ups. The prison is run by Amnesty Pharmaceuticals. The drugs were named from a bingo card. Jeff learns that Steve was not just planning on injecting them with the love drugs. In fact, the man plans on conducting a lot more experiments on them. Steve, on the other hand, feels something is wrong and rushes back to where Jeff is. But Jeff manages to put the key back to its place in time. Steve then begs Jeff not to tell anyone about the unfortunate incident, otherwise the authorities are going to shut down the facility. Jeff is, however, both shocked and upset about what just happened. Steve then makes him feel a little better about the experiments, as he explains that they are doing everything to help humanity. Jeff improves, and we see him and Steve laughing as they recall some amusing episodes from the past. It turns out, however, that the two were utilizing the laughing drug. We next see Steve handing the Darkenflox to Lizzie, who seems strange and afraid of a staple. As Steve examines her behaviors, it appears that he is having fun while the girl is in pain. Jeff and Lizzie are now getting close, and Jeff admits to her that he not only killed his friend in the vehicle accident, but also his girlfriend. Lizzie hugs him and kisses him. She tells him that she understands his pain and tries to comfort him as much as she can. As the two spend more time together, it seems like the two of them are falling in love. Steve notices Jeff's feelings for Lizzie. When Jeff confronts Mark, he gets suspicious of Steve's motives and breaks down. That evening, when Steve informs Jeff that Darkenflox would be administered to Lizzie today, Jeff becomes enraged and orders him not to go along with it. Steve tells him to return to the lab the next morning, and they will begin again. Mark enters Jeff's room and tells Jeff what he knows about Steve and his plans. He informs Jeff that Steve is only interested in one substance, B6, the red drug. Mark realizes he has messed up after telling Jeff all of this. The next morning, Jeff is back with Steve. When Steve asks Jeff to administer Darkenflox to Lizzie, Jeff takes control of Steve's MobiPack and forces him to admit that the true goal of the program is to test a compliance drug, B6. The other drugs are merely side projects, being used to put B6 to the ultimate test, whether or not they would harm their love when commanded to. The entire time that the inmates had been consenting to the various tests, they had really been under the influence of the obedience drug. In addition, Steve informs Jeff that he had in fact finished his sentence 7 months previously, while Lizzie's appeal for release had passed the previous week. Jeff forces Steve to open the main entrance door in order to liberate Lizzie, and then orders him to hand up the pocket knife. Steve resists, instead taking his phone and activating all 4 Darkenflox vials in Lizzie's MobiPack, forcing her to act wildly and attempt suicide. The two fight for dominance, and Jeff manages to disarm Steve while injuring his MobiPack. Jeff goes to Lizzie's aid, successfully removing the Darkenflox vials, and tells her he loves her. But Steve gets up and orders the other inmates to catch Jeff and Lizzie. They are able to escape from Spiderhead after overpowering some of the other inmates and locking the main door behind them. Mark and the police are now approaching the island as Steve escapes on his float plane, but he joyously crashes into a mountain as he is high off of his damaged Moby pack. Meanwhile, Jeff and Lizzie take the remaining motorboat and escape. The end.